Hello and welcome to Palace Intrigue. I am your host, Mark Francis. With the new season of The Crown underway, we'll be taking some time on the weekends to do some episode recaps. The Washington Post described this potential impact of this season, writing, "For an American audience, The Crown is entertainment. In Britain, there's a sense there's more at stake. Netflix has added a fictional dramatization label, but these characters are the faces on the currency. These plot lines feed into the country's sense of its history and of itself. And unlike the early seasons that featured historical figures such as World War II leader Winston Churchill, many of the characters depicted in the fifth season are still very much alive. It matters for the future of the monarchy and its ability to project soft power in the world if Charles is viewed as a jerk. Whereas Queen Elizabeth was widely adored, Charles is merely liked by 44% of the British public. The rest are neutral to hostile. Charles is shown manipulating, orchestrating, conspiring with the press and politicos to cast shade on his mother and to convince the Prime Minister Major to convince the Queen to abdicate the throne and make way for a next generation, meaning Charles. It's all very Game of Thrones with more polling data. On to the recap, spoilers ahead. Season 5's opener is titled Queen Victoria Syndrome. We begin in 1991. The Queen is now 65, played by Imelda Staunton. She's getting a checkup and the doctors say she's in good shape. Perhaps she will live a long life. We also see Charles in his 40s and portrayed by Dominic West. Charles gets news of a forthcoming Sunday Times poll in which respondents described the Queen as irrelevant, old, expensive, and out of touch. He meanwhile gets a glowing review for his modernity. Almost half of the respondents think he'll make a great king and they'll support his mother's abdication. The poll suggests the Queen has Queen Victoria Syndrome, an aging monarch too long on the throne whose remoteness from the modern world has led people to grow tired of not just her but of the monarchy itself. Even for Charles, there's a catch. His popularity is tied to Diana. Charles and Diana head off to Italy. Charles asks Diana if they should give them some of the old magic. They decide yes, and the photographers love it. Meanwhile, Prince Philip discovers the ship, the Britannia, is falling apart and tells Elizabeth it's no surprise given the ship's age. Sentimentally, I think we'd all prefer to stick with her, but we'd have to be realistic about the cost of repairs when she's so obviously past her best, lest you miss this episode's metaphor. Back in Italy, Charles cuts the trip short. Diana is not happy. On the flight home, young Prince William picks up on his mother's sadness and offers his hand. It's clear that the boys aspire to protect their mother. Meanwhile, the Queen asks the Prime Minister to finance the refurbishment of the Britannia, adding, "She is a floating, seagoing expression of me." Again, in case you missed the theme of this episode. Back at Balmoral, Philip goes on a tirade about the need to save Britannia, while Charles later tells him pointedly that old things like that are too costly to keep repairing. Next, Diana unloads upon him about how the young royal marriages, Anne and Mark's, Andrew's and Sarah's, as well as hers and Charles, are struggling. She predicts they'll end within 6 months, and she believes the news will take the monarchy with them. Palace Intrigue will be right back. Episode 2 begins with Philip speaking with the press about his new hobby, carriage driving. He enjoys the competition of it. The interview is cut short as he learns his friend's 5-year-old child has died of cancer. Elizabeth suggests he visit his friend Norton because he is the godfather. We then catch up with Diana's story. A journalist, Andrew Morton, speaks to James Colthurst, a friend of the princess who wants to speak to him about Diana. James tells Diana about this journalist. Andrew Morton intends to write a book about Diana to reveal the truth about joining the royal family. Philip visits Norton, but he's out for work, so he accompanies Norton's wife Penny instead and visits their child's grave. Philip raises with Penny how long life commitment does not consider growing in separate directions as he references his wife, Elizabeth. He then suggests they set up a charity in their child's name and think of new hobbies. Penny offers Philip an old 4-in-1 carriage. He believes it could be a new hobby for Penny to repair old carriages. Philip organizes the carriage to be refurbished and they ride out on it. After enjoying the carriage ride, Penny reveals that she has heard from Norton that Diana is liaising with a journalist on a tell-all book. Diana is worried about meeting Andrew Morton, but James tells her she does not need to meet him, instead create tape recordings and have a middleman, which would be James. Diana records a tape, revealing all: her turbulent marriage with Prince Charles, the cold shoulder from the Queen, the system behind the institution to keep her quiet, and the suicide attempts. Why is she doing this? Diana says she has tried everything else, speaking to Charles, talking to the Queen, but her specific concern is the custody of her children. The Crown can assume the legal custody of heirs to the throne, so Diana can't take the boys abroad without risking losing them. Diana says her husband's priority was always Camilla or the Queen. And finally, we see Diana discuss her suicide attempts, admitting she threw herself down the stairs of Sandringham when she was pregnant with William. Philip and Diana meet. Philip talks about the importance of privacy. Philip says it's wrong to look at the Windsors as a family. It's really a system they're all in for better or worse. And airing grievances causes greater damage to the system than it would a family, and they cannot air their grievances when things do not go their way. Philip is firm with Diana, telling her to be loyal to her husband and not to rock the boat. Diana is speechless. Philip tells the Queen about his meeting with Diana and says that Diana will be fine. The Queen is concerned by his advice that husbands and wives should withhold secrets from each other. He tries to backtrack but digs in deeper, suggesting discretion is key to keeping things intact. The book is published, and we're on to our next crisis. Tomorrow, recaps of episodes 3 and 4. And there you have it. If you'd like to email us, our address is thepalaceintrigue@gmail.com. Please follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite shows. I'm Mark Francis. My thanks to John McDonald's, Palace Intrigue, and Times.